On September 16th, Blackwater guards opened fire in Baghdad's main square and killed 17 Iraqi citizens. Blackwater contends its employees came under fire from threatening targets while escorting a U.S. convoy through Baghdad. But an investigative committee set up by Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki found no evidence that the Blackwater convoy came under any direct or indirect fire, or that it was even hit by stones. The Iraqi government backed off initial demands that the company immediately leave the country, saying it wanted Washington to sever all contracts with Blackwater within 6 months. However, in a recent press conference, President Bush commented,
"A firm like Blackwater provides a valuable service. They protect people's lives. And I appreciate the sacrifice and the service that the Blackwater employees have made."
The Blackwater incident is becoming a test of just how sovereign is Iraq anyway. Joining us is Professor Sabah Al-Nasseri, Professor of Political Science at York University. Professor, what's your take on the Blackwater, on the case as it stands now, and also the whole question of the privatization of war in Iraq?
The problem with those private security firms is that they represent the second biggest contingent in Iraq besides the US Army. They act beyond any kind of legal constructions and obligations. That means the Iraqi government actually cannot intervene on a legal level to punish those who committed crime in Iraq.
This is because under the Iraqi law, the Americans had a provision that said these contractors weren't subject to Iraqi law.
Exactly. They act beyond any Iraqi, but also international laws. And they are only obliged to their private contractor, right? So the problem is you cannot control them, you cannot regulate the way they act in Iraq.
What stops Iraq from simply passing a law saying they are subject to Iraqi law?
Well, what stops Iraq to pass a law to end the occupation in Iraq?
Well, do they really want to? Does the Iraqi government want to end the occupation?
This is the big question. Where we are talking about the Iraqi government, but there is no such an Iraqi government.
But if you talk about Iraqi politicians, that class does not seem to be in any hurry to end the occupation.
I would say there's contradiction within this ruling class in Iraq. There are those who actually want to end the occupation by political means, but the majority depend on the occupying troops and their position and power. So they need actually the foreign troops to sustain their political power and to produce this, right?
Well, what would happen to these people if there was a withdrawal?
Yeah, that's why they try to delay the withdrawal actually, by saying if the foreign troops, the so-called coalition, international coalition, withdraw from Iraq, we will have a civil war, we will have a sectarian war.
But is it also a real problem in the sense that for the Iraqi people, for ordinary people,
Yeah.
will all these various interests simply go to war?
Most of the violence you have in Iraq now is against the occupation. So if you end the occupation, so the major part of violence will be pacified through political means. You still have some groups, be them criminal, or they act due to ideological issues or whatever. You still have these groups, but you can control such groups. You can act in a political and legal sense to discipline such groups.
If much of this political class doesn't want to end the occupation, they won't do anything to piss off the Americans too much, which means they won't go after Blackwater. Exactly. They could, but they won't.
In this situation, it is a contested situation. We have like a formation of a new group, classes, and so on within the societies. And they have developed a kind of new middle class, if you'd like. And part of these groups of the middle class are subcontractor for different international firms, among other the security firms. So we have here concrete interest. Some groups who try to perpetuate the violence situation in order to pose themselves as those who are taking care of political order and security, you know, on the street.
What I find interesting about what you've written, and I think a piece of this that gets very minimized in a lot of other analysis of Iraq, is that a lot of people talk about the Maliki government and the political forces in Iraq as pure puppets of the Americans. And they're really not. They very much have their own interests, and they want the occupation. They also want to contend with the U.S. They also have plans for the future without the U.S., but they really have their own interests. So when they don't take a more vigorous action on Blackwater, it's not because, you know, George Bush is hitting them over the head. It's because it's in their own calculations what's good for them.
That's why I'm talking about a correlation of political and economic interests between the Bush administration and the ruling and governing class in Iraq. If it goes well with the United States, they will do that. But if they realize it's very problematic, they try to take kind of critical distance to the administration, but not that critical, because they know, on the last analysis, they depend on the U.S. troops and their political power, right?